It's my absolute pleasure today to welcome Barbara Heidenreich. Today, Barbara is going to be talking about when the right thing is negative and looking at how do we optimize animal welfare by shaping behaviour with negative reinforcement. Barbara is an animal training and behaviour consultant, and she specialises in exotic animals. Barbara consults worldwide, and we're really lucky to have her with us today. She works with zoos, she works with universities, veterinary professionals, and she's also worked on conservation projects. She's worked on site with over 90 facilities in 29 countries, so got a real kind of broad knowledge base that Barbara's going to bring to us today. Barbara is an advisor for the Animal Training Working Group and the Parrot Taxon Advisory Group for EAZA, and she operates an online educational program called Animal Training Fundamentals, which you can see on the slides, and her contact details are on the last slide as well. So thank you very much, Barbara, for coming along. Really appreciate it, and we would welcome you to start your presentation.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm very thrilled to be here today. So since we got a little late start, I'm going to dive right into it. And first, I want to give a big thank you to some folks here who really have helped me come to understand the information that I'm going to be sharing with you today. It kind of starts with 𝘕𝘱𝘵𝘪𝘮𝑐𝑡𝑟𝑒𝑠. It's been supported very much by Joe Lang and 𝘕𝘱𝘵𝘪𝘍𝑒𝑠 and his students at the University of North Texas in Denton have really pioneered the practical application information that you're going to be hearing today. And I really encourage you to scan the QR code so that you can get some more resources and also some empirical evidence that supports what I'm going to be talking about today. And I'll show that code again at the end of the presentation if you missed it at the beginning here. So first I'm going to show a video, and I want you to just watch this and look at these examples and see if you can figure out what all these videos have in common, which is basically that they all kind of want the same thing, and see if you can figure out what those animals want. Oh, the goats are all running back. A little bitey. Oh, you say no way? Yes. Okay. So the brush is weird. That's new, huh?
That's your bite.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'd say it comes right after it.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Have you brought that milk?
Oh,
What's your big?
don't kick it. That's pretty good. Well, I went in.
So when I
That's pretty intense.
coffee, back that thing up and tiny bit strategy.
Okay.
So, yeah, the fun jumping thing with looks like all four paws on the ground of the crate.
That's coming to be mean, right? So if you guessed distance, that is the answer. All those animals want distance from something. So sometimes the animals are moving away from something, and so we might describe that as a fear response. Sometimes the animal's trying to drive something away, and we might describe that as an aggressive response. And in some cases, we might see an animal that's showing something that we would call conflicted or hesitant, and that would be a situation where the animal maybe wants access to something appetitive, but they're also having to tolerate something that they find aversive at the same time. And when we see that, any of those circumstances, that likely means a negative reinforcement contingency is already involved in maintaining the behavior that you're observing. So when that happens, that means a negative reinforcement procedure is the right procedure to use. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, when you hear the word negative, it brings up all sorts of things. But one of the things we want to keep in mind is that the word negative has many definitions. And the one that we tend to gravitate towards is that negative means bad or undesired or harmful. But it can also mean not detected, like a negative result. We sometimes use the word negative to mean like pessimistic, but in chemistry, it can mean electronegatively charged. But we can also use negative to say like, no, I don't want that, rejected. But in our definition, negative means minus or to remove. And that's what I want you to keep in mind when we talk about negative reinforcement in our particular field. So negative reinforcement is actually just a learning process. And by definition, it involves the removal, right? That definition of a stimulus as an outcome of emitting a response. And what will happen is that results in the increase or strengthening of a behavior under whatever conditions, under whatever those conditions were where that behavior occurred. So that's really just the definition of the learning process. So keep that in mind. It doesn't mean bad. It's just a learning process where something gets removed. So negative reinforcement for us, like I said, is a learning process, and it keeps animals alive. It keeps us alive. It's really a very important learning process. We need it. And one thing I want people to keep in mind is that both negative reinforcement and positive reinforcement, when they're used in a procedure, can be used in ways that can compromise animal welfare or improve animal welfare. And those of you that hopefully will be attending the welfare forum in 2024 are going to learn a lot more about that from one of the invited speakers, Joe Lang, and he will really help you understand where positive reinforcement can be coercive. And I know we often hear that positive reinforcement is the best thing, but it also can be problematic as well. So it's really about how we apply negative reinforcement in a procedure, the learning process in a procedure that needs to be evaluated for its risks and benefits. Same for positive reinforcement, to be quite honest. So we want to avoid labeling learning processes are good or bad. They just are. They just exist out there. We're all learning by both of these processes all the time. And what we want to do is we want to think about how we use them in a procedure. So we can improve welfare by learning to shape with a very benign application of negative reinforcement. It doesn't have to be coercive. It's very different from what I would describe as a contrived application, and we'll talk about what that looks like in just a second here. So when we use procedures to address that negative reinforcement contingency that's already happening so that positive reinforcement can be effective, we can improve animal welfare. So let's talk about this difference between functional versus contrived reinforcers. I know these are kind of big words sometimes, and it's like, what do those look like in our animal training world? So we have to ask ourselves, what is the actual desired outcome the animal is seeking when they do these behaviors? Why is that animal lunging at somebody? And so we already talked about like distance being a desired outcome. So that would be a functional reinforcer. The animal's not doing that to get food. So it's kind of weird to give an animal food for being aggressive, right? So when we identify the functional reinforcer, what we end up doing is we're actually using the right thing. We're avoiding a delay to an appropriate intervention and actually potentially continuing to reinforce that undesired response. So if I'm using food to reinforce aggression or try to fix aggression when the animal is saying, I want you to go away, then I'm probably making it worse by delaying getting to the root of the problem. So what we often see in animal training is that people tend to overlook that the distance from a stimulus already in the environment, something that the animal's already afraid of or already doesn't want there, is overlooked. So it might be a person, it might be an object, it might be a place, it might be a smell, it might be a sound. It also might be something that we need to take care of the animal. Maybe we need the animal to get on that scale, or we need the animal to be comfortable with the syringe, or we need the animal to be okay with the veterinarian being present. And so maybe we do need the animal to learn to be able to tolerate that thing. How do we make that happen? And if we recognize that distance is the functional reinforcer, then we can actually make progress. Now, contrived reinforcers, these are things that we are inserting into the environment to evoke behavior. And believe it or not, when we train with positive reinforcement, a lot of times we are doing that. We are inserting food into the environment to get the animals to do behaviors. And the same can be seen with negative reinforcement when somebody brings in something scary to get the animal to do something. When you bring in that rake to get the animal to move away from you, when you hose at their feet to get them to walk away, that would be an example of a contrived application of negative reinforcement. And I've got a little video to show you an example of contrived negative reinforcement. It's not a real, intense example, but it is an example of using negative reinforcement where something aversive is inserted into the environment to get behavior. So let's take a look at that video real quick. Nothing fancy. I actually was staying at a hotel in Germany somewhere, and this was behind the hotel. And I was like, oh, perfect example. So again, that panel evokes that behavior of the horse moving forward, right? So to move away from that panel. Okay, so hopefully that helps explain that a little bit for you. So there's lots of behaviors that we often see maintained by negative reinforcement in our world. And again, these might be aversive stimuli already in the environment or needed for animal care. And this might be aggressive responses towards people or other animals, fear responses towards people or other animals, fear responses towards objects like syringes, scales, novel items, fear responses towards locations like maybe a chute, or maybe the animal doesn't want to shift into another space that we have for it. We might see fear responses towards events like the door closing or being separated from another individual or group. So let's look at a few examples, and you are going to see in these examples some of the application of this procedure of negative reinforcement by giving distance as a reinforcer. I'm going to talk more about the details in just a little bit here, but I just wanted you to get a little taste at first, and then we'll get into details in a bit here. So in this example, you see the donkey that is afraid to get on a scale, and you'll get a little taste of how we address that using a negative reinforcement procedure. You are going to see the animal getting food for moving forward and back, but we also need a way to ask the animal to move forward and back. So that involves a little bit of using some carrots, right? A little bitey. Oh, you say no way? Okay.
Good girl. Okay.
So she is a good candidate for that. Some of the procedures we did there. So yeah, because you see the conflict, right? It's the negative reinforcement contingency paired with the positive reinforcement. So we've got the hesitancy. So she's saying this is an aversive stimulus.
Go back.
Yeah. So what we want to do with her is we want to bring her forward, but only to the place that her body language is relaxed. And then we're going to move her away from the aversive stimulus.
Okay.
So sped up a little bit here. But, take a look at how we try to keep her head a little bit more over her shoulders. She's not having to lean forward so much like you saw in the beginning and try to reach for that carrot. And by doing this, we were able to get her a lot closer to the scale much faster. With better body language, I should add. Looking more comfortable, ears forward.
So let's depend on the animal. It will depend on the animal.
Yes, now I was asking that to Barbara, and he said that with these type of...
really close.
I think it's time to go back again.
Yeah, I would reinforce that with some distance and see if you can get another rep. But I think you're right that you maybe having to get on the scale might be something to start getting her more towards the center, because she might start to walk around it. Okay. So now let's look at an example with some aggressive responses. So this is a rhinoceros iguana that would aggress towards people whenever they would go into his enclosure to clean.
Like, to get his food bowl in there in the mornings, I lure him over here, open the door and throw it in really fast, and then close the door and stuff like that.
Gotta say, that was a pretty awesome rep. He laid down. That's pretty awesome. And in this example, we have two young pelicans, and one was showing aggressive responses towards the other. And so we kind of have both things. We have aggression and we have a fear response. And you'll see the smaller one gets really quiet when she sees the bigger one. So we're going to use the bigger one approaching and retreating on good behavior when to address his aggressive responses, which in turn causes the little one to relax, to be honest, when she starts seeing that the bigger one is not showing aggressive responses. And you'll see how the caregiver uses her attention as a reinforcer to reinforce the moving forward and back. But you think he would
attack that one? Yeah.
Yeah, but also likely follow you?
Yeah, definitely.
So
I don't only do cleaning behavior with him as well. So that's when I will.
So he's thinking about attacking that one.
Yeah. And that one's quite quiet.
Right. But see how he got distracted and is calm? Like that would be a good moment to sort of say, well, let's go this way, because you're not thinking about attacking the other one. So here's building reinforcement history for the right behaviors by bringing him closer and removing him for the correct responses. And this took about 20 minutes. Wow. You're both exhausted now and need naps. All that work.
Me too.
And I know I've shared this one a lot, but it was early in learning how to apply this, and but I do think it gives some good visuals. So this is a Sumatran tiger, and again showing it was actually a wild caught animal, it was a nuisance animal, and so you can see the conflict where they're trying to use positive reinforcement targeting, and again this is what a lot of us have been taught to do to address things like this. So targeting, giving food, but you'll see that conflict that we talked about where it's a positive reinforcement contingency competing with negative reinforcement. So the animal wants the food, but it's having to tolerate that aversive stimulus of people. It doesn't want to interact with people. So I'll use that approaching and retreating on desired responses to try to build reinforcement history for the responses that I want to see. And by doing that very quickly, we're able to address the negative reinforcement contingency in the animal. It will show very different body language when we transition to positive reinforcement. And again, this was a number of years ago when I was first learning how to do this. I think there's things I can do that I would improve upon now that I have practiced it more. But it still gives you some good visual about how quickly you can transform this behavior by taking care of this negative reinforcement contingency first. So what I'm looking at is I'm looking that he's looking at me, right? and he's a little concerned, but now he's not. And see how he's not? I would walk away from that. I would be like, okay, that's cool. So again, just speeding it up so that you can get the idea. So he's vocalizing there. I kind of waited till he stopped vocalizing and then I moved away. But again, how I would improve upon this is I would try to not even get to the point that the animal felt the need to vocalize. I would probably remove myself prior to getting those kinds of responses if I could. So again, I think he might have been vocalizing a little bit and I was just waiting for something better. But again, I could start under conditions in which he could not even feel the need to vocalize. Look how he's looking now. I'm really trying to get up there. Yes, ma'am.
So sudah bertambahlah kalamnya.
So that's the idea. And so hopefully you could see very different body language there. And that, again, was just one training session. So it really makes a difference. So I thought now what I would address is kind of the strategies that we've typically been taught to use and why negative reinforcement for me has been the better alternative. A lot of us have been taught that what we should use to address these fear responses or aggressive responses is systematic desensitization and counter conditioning. But let's talk about what's really happening in a procedure like that. Systematic desensitization is considered an exposure therapy. And what that means is we give the animal repeated exposure to the aversive stimulus. And what happens is we wait for that fear response to extinguish. Now, we may be doing, that exposure, to just a little tiny degree, but it still relies on extinction of fear responses. And we're really focusing on sort of that emotion or emotional behavior. And what happens is each exposure puts a little bit more pressure on the animal. So you bring that stimulus closer, the animal gets a little bit afraid, it goes away, and then you come a little bit closer. And so a little bit of a fear response happens and it goes away, and then more pressure, and then a little bit of fear response, and then it goes away, and a little bit more pressure. The food or appetitive that you offer maybe just speeds up that extinction process. But in reality, the animal can't control the outcomes, which is why it's slow and frustrating, because that's what happens with extinction. And this is different from negative reinforcement, because in negative reinforcement, the stimulus is removed for desired responses. So what happens is the animal is actually controlling the outcome with its behavior, which is really cool. So distance is provided for desired responses that are easily reinforced. So we're creating conditions in which animals can give us those desired responses. And the aversive stimulus is removed with each repetition. So we're building reinforcement history. The animal's learning, oh, this is what works to make that go away. The animal learns its behavior controls the removal of the stimulus. And so that's why we get this fast voluntary participation. And so that's why it happens like in one session, whereas a lot of times people spend months and months and months trying to use systematic desensitization and counter conditioning. And then what happens is the animal has one bad experience, like you go to give that injection, and guess what? You're right back where you were, and you feel like, oh, I have to retrain the behavior all over again and go through that whole process of systematic desensitization and counter conditioning again, because what happens with extinction often is spontaneous recovery and resurgence of, so these are all the fallouts of extinction. So this is why actually shaping a new behavior is a better strategy for us. especially if it's maintained by negative reinforcement. So another thing I think that happens is people get confused as to if they're actually using systematic desensitization or are they using negative reinforcement. They call it the wrong thing. So like an example I hear often is, oh, the animal's in its enclosure, it's afraid of me, I'm going to walk by and drop food and then walk away. But that is actually an example of negative reinforcement, because the person approaches, the aversive stimulus approaches, they drop food and then they walk away. So the animal's doing something, but the aversive stimulus gets removed on the animal doing something. The food being dropped is sort of irrelevant because the animal will walk up later and eat that. But what actually happened is an aversive stimulus approached, the animal did something, and the aversive stimulus went away. So that's actually negative reinforcement. It's not systematic desensitization and counter and conditioning. So if you actually can understand what is going on there and go, oh, I'm actually using negative reinforcement, and applied it with actual precision in a procedure, you could actually get to where you wanted to really fast. So let's look at that overall process. What does it look like? We identify what is the aversive stimulus that the animal is responding to. We want to create conditions under which the animal can give us desired responses. And that's sometimes the tricky part in the zoo community, because we have so many weird conditions that we have to deal with. We're going to remove that stimulus for desired responses. And so we gradually shape lots of desired responses using negative reinforcement. And this addresses that negative reinforcement contingency. And then we do want to transition to positive reinforcement if it's not already a part of your procedure. And then we're shaping that desired response, typically a little bit with negative reinforcement and hopefully with positive reinforcement too. And I will say it does take practice if you've never done it before. It's weird to remove yourself. You're so accustomed to giving something with positive reinforcement, and your timing does matter, just like it does with positive reinforcement. There's different criteria you change. Sometimes it's how close you are to the animal, how long, or I should say the stimulus is, how long it has contact. And there's lots of different behaviors that you may reinforce. I have flexibility in how I raise criteria. I don't focus on just one criterion at a time. I change different things that I'll accept, and what order it may be. It's definitely, you're scanning for lots of different behaviors that will work, because the more responses that are successful, the quicker you can build a new repertoire that works to get the aversive stimulus to move away, and the less likely it is the animal will use the old thing that worked, whether that was to run away or use aggressive responses. So this is why we want lots of new behaviors that will work. Before you begin, it's important that you start someplace where the animal can be calm and relaxed. So the aversive stimulus needs to be far enough away. And that's so that we get reinforceable behavior. You want to know what it looks like when an undesired response is gonna be emitted. So, how, like, is it the animal stands up straight? Do the eyes get big? Is it the neck stretching too far? What is it that's undesired that you want to make sure you avoid? How is that aversive stimulus going to be approached or retreated? Or is it going to move towards the animal, move away? Or does the animal move towards it, move away? You need to figure that out. And what are those goal behaviors that you're going to be reinforcing? What do you want to reinforce? So you want to have some ideas of what that looks like. So we're going to look at some more examples of how that shaping process is applied, so you can get an idea of how to do it yourself. So with this dik moves away away from people when they enter its habitat. And so you're going to see some of that approaching and retreating based on behavioral responses, how the distance is decreased, how time in front of the animal is increased. And so basically this is an example of that shaping process with negative reinforcement. So again, you're going to notice some things. We want the animal to notice the stimulus approaching. And so she's, it's not a surprise. And she's looking for little things, maybe it's how much time she can stand in front of the animal. Maybe some, so there she noticed the animal moved its mouth a little bit in a way that she liked, that seemed kind of relaxed. And so she removed herself on that. The animal turned its head away. So. And at that point, she was so close in that one session that she probably could have transitioned to offering food if she want. And we'll talk about what that looks like in a little bit here. So with this one, you'll see an ostrich that is showing aggressive responses when people try to enter the gate. And in this one, what I worked on demonstrating how to shape is I can reinforce the animal for going away from me. And so when the animal started to move away from me, I walked away. And eventually I decreased the distance that I walked away so that I was closer to the gate, and the animal learned to move away from the gate so that people could work towards going through the gate.
Take that one, because I don't think he's going to go as far away as he did. What I want to do is I want to remove myself. I want him to get some.
And eventually we can transition that to positive reinforcement. Once he learns you go way over there, then I can start maybe tossing him an apple or something. But if we started with that, it wouldn't have taken care of the negative reinforcement contingency. He would have just gone over there and eaten the apple and come back and kicked at the gate. So that's why we need to address negative reinforcement first. This one, this wildebeest, he was charging people whenever they would enter the habitat. So we wanted to teach him to shift into another space. And so you're going to see how we used negative reinforcement to teach him to start walking into the shift area. And then there's food waiting for him. And eventually we put food in there, and that was waiting for him in there. And in one session, he did start to shift into that desired space.
Nobody was here, and they came in. Then we said, they're doing nothing. Yeah.
So that's right, because he's giving us. Oh, there he is. So I'm just going to leave before anything bad happens. There he is. Okay. And now I'm going to move away before he gets angry. Oh, gotta move. Yeah. So I'm hoping for him to walk a little bit in our direction before we go away, so he learns to come. Okay, let's go. But he's coming slowly instead of charging, right? Which is what we want. Oh, moving a little. Okay, now he's starting to move. Okay. Get ready to move back forward. Yep. There we go. You want to come more? Okay. That's the female again, yes? But if she goes in, she may give him confidence. He may follow her. Let's see. Ooh, we like that. Ooh, look at that. Look at that. Oh, don't run out, girl. I'm scared. Oh, he's still in. He's still in there, isn't he? I think he is.
No.
So since we're starting to run out of time here, I'm going to skip ahead to a few things. Just move on. These are more aggressive things here. I'm going to talk about just the process in general here. And I know there's a lot of words on this slide, but they kind of talk about how we go from negative reinforcement to positive reinforcement. So on the left side, you'll see some possible behaviors you might be reinforcing or that are maintained by negative reinforcement. So you might see running away, moving away, flying away, vocalizing, hissing, pinning back ears, all those things may be those undesired behaviors that you see happen that are maintained by negative reinforcement. So we're going to use negative reinforcement to teach new desired responses to get distance. And as that happens, what starts to happen is new behaviors are going to start to emerge. Like maybe the animal attends to you, maybe they sniff, they touch, they taste, they approach. And we call that the switch over. And the animal, you might describe them as being curious, investigative, or interested. And reinforcement history is being built for these new desired behaviors. And that's when the animal starts getting receptive to positive reinforcement. And then we switch over to positive reinforcement. And now we get animals that approach without hesitation. They're receptive to appetitives. We might describe them as friendly, affiliative, interactive, and then we fully transition to positive reinforcement. So this is how the overall process works. And I just wanted to get that in there so you kind of get a vision for where we're going with all of this. And I really wanted to make sure I kind of wrap up with letting you see how this is important to optimizing animal welfare. Because that's really where all this goes to for me. So like with this particular black bear, she had a bad experience in the back area with a veterinary procedure. And so now only one person at a time could be in the back area with her. And in order to do her veterinary care, they do need more than one person to be able to work with her in the back area. So I wanted you to see how we apply it here to get back on track with these animals so that we can give them their veterinary care. And then I'll show you another video, and then hopefully we can get to your questions. So I was very specifically reinforcing certain responses there that she was giving me. I know it might be hard to see just because it's dark bear and a dark space there, but all those, looking away or putting her head down or changing position or just staying relaxed were getting reinforced by removal of me in her space. And now we're increasing criteria, adding that second person. And again, she's still giving us responses we want. And what you're going to see here soon is that we're going to transition to positive reinforcement, and you'll see even more good body language that we want to see. And this is moving towards being able to have 2 people in the back area again with her, so that her veterinary care can happen in this back area, which is where we want to be able to give it. And I don't know if I mentioned before, but even before we started, 3 of us in the kitchen talking was causing her to do those undesired responses. So, just us talking was enough to trigger those undesired responses. So it's really cool to see how fast it can make a difference. And I think I'll skip to this one because so many people have this problem where they can't close doors and have animals stay in a, closed in area because they're uncomfortable with the door closing. And it's such a challenge for so many places that I really want to talk about this one. So you're going to see that the gorilla is uncomfortable with having a shift door closed. And yes, they're giving him food for remaining at a station, but the critical reinforcer is escape. That is really what's important to him. And you're going to see that the person is looking at his body language, and the movement of the door or the person standing near the door handle or moving the door handle is all really related to what the gorilla is doing. It's the food is not being delivered contingent on anything he's doing in response to the door handle. So keep that in mind. And this is a long conversation we could have about doors and how to use negative reinforcement to help with door closing. But I just wanted to give you a little taste of it because I know we're short on time here now. But this is so critical because, as we know, if animals can't be closed in holding areas, whether it's to provide medical care or whether there's, compromised habitats outside that need to be attended to, it's just vital. It's such an important part of what we do to provide for their health and welfare that this is such an important thing that we need to address. And this is such an important tool to help us address this. So I'm going to share this video and then we'll wrap it up and we'll get to your questions.
And he can or can't open it down. So he's gonna bang after that. Like, I don't know that's not gonna show. Great. He definitely looked, but then he relaxed, and you stopped, which is perfect. Okay, so stop, wait. We'll let him come back. And when he comes back, you're going to take that step away like you've been doing. Okay, he's coming, so you can walk away. Excellent. Good job. Good job. Nice work.
So they're just going to build some reinforcement history for working through their approximations of getting closer to the door handle, moving it, and again, not moving it for him. And he can see all that. He's looking at them. They're making all the noises. And again, the food isn't and again, I pushed a little too much there. So she's holding still. He comes back. She moves away or puts the door handle down. So that is the critical reinforcer there. Again, pushed too much. He came back. So she stopped moving the door handle.
Oh, nice. And I'd open it right back up. Excellent, guys. Nice work. Very good. Oh, great. And open it right back up. Nice work, you guys. Excellent.
Good job, buddy.
And then open it up. Look at you guys.
Good boy, I like that you're making the noise too.
Yep, you're not being sneaky. You're not being sneaky.
Yeah.
Look at you, rock stars.
And I was just there like a month ago, and he's fine with all those doors closing in the back there, and I can do it in any space, and he's totally cool with it now. So it's great. All right. And I do want to make a plug for the welfare forum, because we'll be going in, we're going to be going into more details about how to do all this, do a little workshop on all this. So I encourage you to come. But I do want to say once again that, you know, this procedure is just so vital. It makes us possible to address these situations that we thought were impossible to train. It really does. It helps us transition away from coercive procedures that involve superimposition, which again, Joe Lang will talk about at the forum, exposure therapies and extinction procedures. It helps us identify the functional reinforcer, which in this case, like I said, with the gorilla, was escape, distance. He didn't want that thing closed, which can lead to swift, appropriate interventions. They've been working on that behavior for months, and we got it done in one session. And it can bring you clarity on how all the learning processes may be impacting your target behavior, so that we can improve our programs and provide optimal welfare. So thank you for letting me share what my clients have been working on towards improving animal welfare. And I look forward to continuing to learn and share with all of you, and facilitating dissemination of information. So with that, if you have more questions, I'm happy to connect with you. Again, this QR code has a PDF with a lot more resources and references, especially to empirical studies. If you want some more examples that have been, you know, showing that this procedure is a great procedure and needs to be added to your behavioral repertoire. And with that, I am going to bring us to this last slide here and pass it over to our host. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Barbara. That was a fabulous talk, and it was really interesting to see all of that kind of happening live on those videos as well. Really impressive. So we've got a few questions, and if you're okay for time, if we just do like 10 minutes of questions or so, we'll just go a little bit later than planned, if that's all right. Thank you. First question that we've got here is, well, the question is, how do you do it with large groups of baboons? But I think actually how do you do it with groups is probably also really useful.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually do have a presentation on how to do it with herds of antelope and other hoofstock, because that was a situation that I was faced with a facility that I worked with, where all wild-caught herds pretty much. And really the way that you apply it is you need to respond to the first animal. Whenever you do a repetition, the first animal that gives you any kind of indication, like say, for example, it's a fear response, the first animal that gives you any behavior that's reinforceable, remove yourself on that. And if you see any animal that sort of alerts and looks like I'm thinking about, you know, leaving or doing anything undesired, you need to respond to that. So remove yourself on that right away, because what can happen is if one animal says, I'm out of here, the whole group is going to model that behavior and give you an undesired response. And basically you kind of lose the whole group. So it's responding to the first animal that gives you what you want. So if somebody like looks at you and is attending to you, then I tend to remove myself on that right away before it escalates into something undesired. And what happens then is they also start learning from each other. So if somebody is responding well, like if I approached and everybody stayed calm and I moved away, then they all kind of go, oh, well, that guy's cool with it, so I guess it's okay. And then, I get a little bit closer and somebody looks up and then goes back to eating or something, and then I remove myself, then they're like, oh, well, he's fine with it. And pretty soon the whole group learns by watching everybody else. And so you're not necessarily focused on one individual animal, you're focused on every single animal that responds in that moment.
Fabulous, thank you. We've got another question here from Ord. I don't know if you want to come on the mic, Ord, or do you want me to ask the question? Hang on, sorry, this has come through to Sally.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, there we are. Thank you.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay, great. So thank you very much for your time, Barbara, and for all the things you always talk to us. It was very useful already during the EAZA annual conference, but very nice to hear it again, because it takes time for our brains, I think, to digest all this information. I was wondering, based on what you explained, it seems very important to always have a transition at some point to positive reinforcement. So I suppose there is kind of a risk of regression if we don't do that transition at the right time. And if it's true, then how can we evaluate that it's the right time to stop with this technique and go to like transition?
Yeah. How do you know when do you switch over, right? Yeah. So it takes practice to kind of get to know what behaviors you're going to look for. And so I think for me, what I tend to see is you'll see and this is where I was saying, like, if you can identify what are the responses you think are undesired, and what is your goal behavior, if you kind of can have a vision, because you are trying to build new behaviors, right? So I know, like, when we speak in our conversational language, we tend to say things like, oh, I want a calm animal, or I don't want to see aggressive behavior. We might have to break that down into more detail. So what does calm look like to you? So is the animal have its ears forward? Are the eyes, like almond shape instead of big and round? So you might have to have more detail just to describe those things so that you know exactly what you're looking for. So like sometimes for me, I can reinforce an animal walking towards me by walking away, but I might even look at, like, what does that look like? So like with the wildebeest, you could see he was still swishing his tail quite a bit when he was walking forward. So even though we got that behavior, we might need to see that look less, more like maybe his tail is down and his head is lowered, and maybe there's no he's not pushing air through his nostrils. So we can start describing it in more detail, what we want to see that makes us think now he's ready for positive reinforcement. So even though we were able to get him to eat, we still had to be really far away to get that to happen. And for us, eventually what we want that behavior to look like with the wildebeest is that we can stand next to the gate where we need to shut him in, and he walks in calmly and eats that. So I think as you start describing in more detail what your goals are, you'll be able to narrow down what it will look like when you think the animal is going to be ready to take food from you. Because what you don't want to see is that conflict, right? If you know what conflict looks like, where the animal's maybe still hesitant or still showing aggressive responses while it's eating, then you might say, oh, I haven't really taken care of the negative reinforcement contingency yet. So I think what helps is to start identifying what it looks like when the animal's definitely still trying to drive something away or wants to move it away, what conflict looks like, and what you think your goal behavior will look like. So maybe define those in a little bit more detail. I think that's what that one chart I can go back a little bit if you want to look at it. It's this one. Let me get, no, there it is. That's what this chart kind of helps with. So I kind of wrote out some examples on the top of what those might look like for different animals. But I think if you could describe at the top for your animal, what does the red section look like is what you're trying to get away from. The middle would be your switching over to positive reinforcement. And then the green would be what you hope the behavior will look like eventually. So you would sort of fill in those descriptions yourself. Sorry, that's a long answer, but that's the chart I would go back to if you watch this video again, maybe freeze on that and sort of think about how would I fill that in for my goals.
That's really fabulous. Thanks, Barbara. We've got another question here, just a quick one from Daphne. Daphne's going to unmute and ask this.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Hi, thanks, Barbara, for that presentation. It was really insightful because, I mean, my whole career, I've just been using positive reinforcement, and I'm very used to, I guess, using a whistle as a bridge in your videos. So I noticed that you weren't using a bridge. So for negative reinforcement, is that not a necessary thing, or could we do without it? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure, yeah.
Sure, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think a bridging stimulus is, it's a great conversation to have. We could do a whole nother hour on that, huh? Yeah, so, in my experience, animals are paying attention to everything in the environment that helps predict reinforcement is coming, and even if it's negative reinforcement. So they're paying attention to whatever we're doing that delivers the outcome they want. So I don't really need to insert another signal that is going to predict an aversive stimulus is going away. They're seeing us move away. They're seeing, or if it's them, being asked to move forward and back, they're aware of their body movement. So I don't really feel like I need to actually condition some new stimulus that lets them know that this is happening. So yeah, I just don't feel like it's necessary for this procedure, to be quite honest. So yeah, I just don't use it. They're paying attention to so many things, as you guys know, especially an animal that's learned to be vigilant for an aversive stimulus, especially if it's a fear response. They're looking for every little indicator that, oh, there's that thing I don't, like you guys know, especially animals that have a history with the veterinary professional, they know the sound of the car coming up, right? They see that person from so far away and they're already, giving their responses. So I feel like they learn very quickly. And if they see it, if they're paying attention to it and it goes away, they're like, thank goodness. So I think they're pretty aware, and having to insert an extra stimulus is probably not necessary, at least. And we see evidence of it just in practice. But great question.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Barbara. We have had a few people ask if you have time. They interested in watching the video of the blue and gold macaw with the targets.
Oh, they want to see that one?
Yeah.
Okay,
do you have time? Do you have time for that?
Of course. Yeah. And I'm sorry if this goes through some. I think it's easier just to back up it. It might make a little audio stuff. Oh, I guess not. Yeah. So basically this one, what I wanted to demonstrate with this is this is my blue-throated macaw, and she, I wanted to show how I would shape with negative reinforcement if an animal showed a fear response towards an object. And I pretty much knew that she might avoid this giant buoy target because she had never seen it before. And what you will see is that she's kind of like, whoa, that's weird. I don't want to go near that. And so she leans away from it. And so you'll kind of see that baseline. And what's going to happen is she does want to be near me because she likes me. So she sort of wants to move towards me. And any kind of movement that she makes that comes towards me, I just remove that target. And so that does reinforce any action that she makes towards the target, even though it's not intentional. She's not trying to engage with the target. But, we do that with positive reinforcement too. Even unintentional approximations are reinforced. And what you'll see eventually is that she does intentionally reach towards the target. And when she does intentionally do that, I do reinforce with food, but I also remove the target. So it's a combination of positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. So it's sped up a little bit, but I wanted to explain it so that you kind of can see it happen. So I'll go ahead and play that.
Scary?
So there I'm just, any accidental movements towards it are getting reinforced. And those aren't intention, or, they're not intentional on her part. But I often show this video side by side, because I have a longer course on how to do this in my program, but I show this video compared to another one with a cockatoo, where I used to use the method that I described earlier with systematic desensitization and counter conditioning, where I'm just luring this poor cockatoo to touch this dosing syringe. And you can see the conflict and the hesitancy. And I even switched to a higher value food item so that this cockatoo eventually touches the syringe. But the body language is so different. That cockatoo, is, touching it and pulling away and touching it and pulling away until it finally, does what I want. But you can see that emotional fallout, that collateral, that conflict, because I'm relying on that extinction of the fear response instead of letting the animal, use letting the animal use its behavior to get its desired outcome, which is for that aversive stimulus to go away. And so you see very different body language compared to using negative reinforcement versus using that systematic desensitization and counter conditioning, which is why I wanted to do this, to show that you get a very different body language. So.
Thank you so much, Barbara. That's absolutely fabulous. There are more questions, but we have to end because you have a lot of things to do, and I don't want to sort of keep you too long. But really, really appreciate your time, and there's lots of thanks in the chat, so I hope you get a chance to have a little loads. Thank you for also promoting the EAZA Animal Welfare Forum. That's very much appreciated. For anybody that's missed that, Sal has dropped the registration link in the chat, so if you just go up to that, you can hear more about the work that Barbara and all of her colleagues have been doing. If anybody wants to get in touch, they can just get in touch with you. Is that okay, Barbara, via your details, your I think we had the last slide.
Yeah, let me put that up there again.
Flick that back up. There we go. So if anybody does want to get back in touch, there's a QR code. There's Barbara's details. Thank you, Barbara. We really do appreciate it, and we hope you have a lovely rest of day. Thanks everyone for joining us.